Guys, that right there is Mollie McGlocklin. She is Mollie McGlocklin. Do you imagine that? Over on Instagram. She spells her name Mollie McGlocklin. She's an entrepreneur, says that sleep is a skill, which you'll find out here today, optimizes sleep with technology, things like the Oura Ring,
yes,
accountability, and behavioral changes. She's the host of the Top Sleep Optimization podcast, and she has a great sleep obsessions newsletter. Go click on her link tree over on Instagram, and you can check her out. Mollie, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I really, really appreciate it. I know we're still aligned on so many topics, and I know it's been a long time coming for us, so excited to dive in.
I think we were actually at the same conference this last year. I was at both of the biohacking conferences, Dave's and the Congress in Miami, and you were at least one of those.
Yes.
I'm like, how did I not meet you and hug your neck?
Oh my God. Okay, next time. Are you coming to the one in Vegas by any chance?
They invited me because I did an interview. They really liked my interview I did, but I'm not getting on an airplane with the world being so weird right now. So I told them when it comes back to the East Coast, I would be happy to go back to, say, Miami again. So.
Okay, very nice. Well,
yes,
for one of the next Miami ones, maybe then we can connect. So that would be great.
Yeah. So guys, we have a bona fide sleep expert on here today. And those of you that follow my work, you know I've been talking a lot about different things that I do to help with my sleep, and I've done some stupid stuff in the past we're going to talk about here, but we're also going to talk about how you can truly optimize your sleep. So stay tuned. But first, good golly, Miss Mollie, let's hear your story. Where did you come from? How did you get interested in the topic of sleep? Did you deal with sleep issues yourself?
Yes. So the short story is basically the creation of sleep as a skill really came from solving my own sleep problem. So what that looked like was I was a serial entrepreneur in Manhattan, burning the candle at both ends. And for many years, my relationship to my sleep was one of kind of this fixed state of I'm a short sleeper, I'm a night owl, that's in my genes, all of these stories and narratives that really had me not look too much at my sleep from a perspective, I gotta survive it. That's just how it is for me. That was kind of the narrative. And so from that place, over the years, it started getting more pronounced, and I started having worse and worse relationship to it. I'm going to bed later, I'm waking up later, I'm justified and righteous about it because I say, well, I make my own hours, so, that's no big deal. I'm not noticing that some of these symptoms of kind of ill health were coming up that I didn't quite connect with sleep. So some being anxiety, I had shingles in my 20s, beginnings of an ulcer, some of these things that clearly are signaling something is not right here. Yeah. And so it wasn't until I went through my own period of insomnia while traveling internationally that everything changed. The topic of sleep suddenly became a forcing function at the forefront to really get this handled and get this figured out, because I truly felt like this rock bottom period in my life that I had no control from a place of just something so primal that you would think should be kind of a given for everyone. And so from that, right, like I remember moments when I would be looking at kids that were just like taking a nap, and I'd be like, how I can't even do that. Like just such a lack of empowerment in this area. And just also just a true feeling like I'm losing my mind. I cannot function. This is not sustainable. What do I do? So it wasn't until I went to the doctors in Croatia and left with their version of Ambien that it was really became clear that I need to find a way to get up under this. And that really spurred this whole kind of quest on optimizing my sleep, really going down the rabbit hole on circadian rhythm entrainment, chronobiology, really the science of time. And for even those topics alone were so transformative in my life to transform just the way I structure and take on my days that I couldn't stop talking about it, honestly. And so from that place, it organically grew to working with individuals, small groups. Sleep as a Skill was born, the newsletter, the podcast. We're now in hotels. We work with high performers. We align with different skincare lines, working with Chili Pad, all kinds of things got created out of really getting at the source of the root cause of what was happening there.
And look, I think when people talk about wanting to live a healthy life, they talk about nutrition, rightfully so. Yeah. It's been kind of the cornerstone of most of my work the past almost 2 decades. Movement is also in there. A lot of the biohacks, like we learned at the biohacking conferences that we've been at. But sleep is, I think, right up there. It has to be, because you can have the best diet, you can have the best exercise, but if your sleep is off, I'm sorry. We have enough research out there that shows even one night, guys, listen, one night of crappy sleep actually makes you physiologically metabolic resistant. Now, it's not full on insulin resistance like you would have over years of eating a bad diet, but it's similar in the way it reacts in the body. And if you don't get sleep right, it could develop into a more permanent version of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's so insidious how many areas get impacted, even to your point, for 1 or 2 nights of sleep deprivation. And then many of us might, like, using myself as that example, have had experience of chronic sleep deprivation where virtually every night you're just really, oh, it's fine. Sleep when you're dead, it's kind of mind over matter, a lot of that, right?
Oh, I had a teacher in high school, I'll never forget, Mrs. Johnson, 11th grade. God bless her. She was this very, very sweet, wonderful English teacher. I loved English. I was poli-sci English in undergrad. And so all my English teachers, I give them homage today. But this one was a weird one. Sweet African-American lady, but she would come in and her eyes would be like really big, like she'd been up all night, taking some kind of, wake medicine. And she's like, yes, I slept 2 hours last night. I stayed up reading all night and I slept for 2 hours and I feel great. And I'm just thinking, nah, there's no way. There's no way. Even if she got all REM and deep in that 2 hours, it's still not enough.
And that's a concern, because in certain studies looking at people's performance on, say, certain tests that they might, test constructions, they often the subjective experience is one of not feeling particularly tired. And when I'm speaking to this, it's often, a little sub 6 hours. So not egregious, but not at kind of often the optimal states. And so in those conversations, that's where I think this opportunity for us in our modern society of layering in that objective data a bit. Now, granted, are they great? There's still flaws in just about every consumer grade wearable sleep tracker that's out there at the moment, but it can inform some of our the way that we're relating exactly to the reality of what's happening, because sometimes we can't necessarily trust our subjective reality of our sleep experience.
Yeah, and I want to go to the mistakes I made, but since we're on this topic, I don't get long sleep, Mollie, and I have a theory as to why. I would love to run it by Miss Sleep Expert, but I don't get long sleep. Maybe 6 hours, 7 hours at the most. I don't ever go 8 or 9 hours like I hear some people do. I do 5.5, 6 on average, but in that 5.5 to 6, about 3.5 to 4.5 is REM and deep. So it's like quality percentage of sleep-wise, quality sleep, like 60-something% of it in a short amount of time. And so here's my theory. I don't eat junk food. I don't eat things, and I don't do things that need repair, which is what the sleep process is doing. And I have interviewed other sleep experts, Kirk Parsley, namely.
Yeah,
he talked about when you're in, he's wonderful. When you get into a state of ketosis, it eliminates by about 15 to 20% your need for sleep. And I thought that was really interesting when he said that, because I had always, since I had been in ketosis, experienced maybe a slightly less amount of total sleep, but an increase in the amount of restful and restorative sleep. Is there anything that you've come across that I guess underscores that?
Yes. So one, I think it's important too what you called out. So in some recent studies have looked at this conversation of kind of creating a sleep sweet spot. And so the thinking of the sleep sweet spot is having a range between around 6 to 8 hours of being kind of optimal. And granted, these are all very bio-individual. It does depend on the person, depends on the diet, depends on a lot of factors. So not meaning to get anyone concerned in listening, and none of this is medical advice, just kind of discussing these topics. But in this more recent study, looking at this conversation of sweet spot, that this seems to be a beneficial place to be for adults, healthy adults, to be hanging out at. And then when you're looking at, you start getting a bit too below or a bit too above. So that was the other interesting call out. So hypersomnia, or just leading into oversleeping, that can also seemingly be problematic in the short and long term. So it does take exactly what you're doing of getting up under the workability for yourself, for what you have, the behaviors that you are enacting, and what could be there for quality versus quantity.
You know what's made this difficult for people, and it happens across the board with health things. Drink 8 glasses of water a day. Where did that come from? Get 8 hours of sleep a night for good rest. Where did that come from? Like, that can't be across the board, because we know kids need like 9 to 11, and we know adults as they get older need less and end up getting less. It's like, where do they come up with these like generic recommendations on things like sleep and say it's got to be 8 hours? And so when people, and of course 8 hours isn't 8 hours in the bed, because you could sit there and, you know, dream and wake up in the middle of the night and be awake for a couple of hours of that, but you're in the bed, and so you count that as your 8 hours. It's like, it's a weird dynamic around sleep, the way we think about it.
Oh, absolutely. You know, I think it's kind of this double-edged sword, because I have some clients that are coming in and part of their problem is just a lack of prioritization and time management to account for proper sleep opportunity, if you will. And kind of just part of the quest for them is to carve out enough time and stay committed on their word to actually putting away the things and kind of winding down their mind and being able to be in bed for a certain period of time, right? So with that, then that can be really transformative for those type of individuals. So having a goal to shoot for can make sense. But on the other side of it, there are a lot of other factors that come into play with sleep. And, you know, actually I just had Dr. Michael Bruce, the sleep doctor, on our podcast recently, and he speaks to having 6 hours of sleep a night as someone that lives and breathes sleep. So there is certainly that variation, that range. But I think for many of us, it's important to start looking at when we are getting lower, certainly into the 5 and under, because I will have clients come into that realm, and that's where we are very often very clear that there can be problems down the road. And like you said too, with some of the things that can be affected, whether it's your metabolic health, I'm particularly interested too in the mental health component of it. So that anxiety uptick, which of course feeds into metabolic health.
Yes.
And so as well as just your performance, your productivity. I mean, there are so many things that can have a domino effect from that. So, and also being able to have that in the back of our mind. That's why I really believe this concept of sleep being a skill, because the more we learn about this topic, because inevitably we will travel or something will come up and you'll get a shorter night of sleep. How do you manage that the following day and even multiple days after?
Yeah.
Because the important thing to remember about sleep is that your performance with sleep the night before is not just about last night. It's about the night before that, and some of your behaviors. What did you eat? How stressed were you? All of those things come out. So, and how last night was will affect this night. So you might experience rebound sleep after a night of poor sleep. So once you start to have some of this information and language, then it helps give you a bit more of a sense of being back in the driver's seat around your sleep versus just being mystified of what is going on. I don't know. I guess I just got to survive this. And it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah, I interviewed a guy named Dan Pardee many years ago. Well, I guess.
Great. Fantastic. Yeah, I love him.
And he talks about sleep pressure. So you're going to feel that sleep pressure. And so last night, for some reason, I didn't sleep real well. And so right before this interview, I went and chilled out in my massage chair to kind of just relax a little bit the muscles. And I actually rested, didn't sleep, but I could feel myself resting kind of consciously. And that gives the body a recuperation. I love how the Oura Ring gives you little things. If you can't get a little 10 to 15 minute power nap in and rest your body, and they even have now restorative rest instead of like sleep. And so it kind of differentiates that with like a little green thing on your data. And it's great because it's like people think, okay, I have to get my sleep in from 10 o'clock till 7 o'clock the next day, and there's no wiggle room for anything else to help restore me. And it doesn't work that way for everybody. Some people, and I'm one of those, I'll go to bed at say 7:30, 8 o'clock, but then I'm up at 1:30. I'm up for a few hours, and then I sleep a couple more hours, and I'm good. And my total sleep, the restful sleep, all ends up being great overall. But you look at it, and people are like, wait, how can that be? You did 4.5 here and then 3. So they don't understand that can be helpful too. Or is segmented sleep somehow worse than consecutive sleep?
Yeah, so that biphasic kind of theory too, that a way that we might have kind of interacted with sleep in the past for many years, where we might have had two-part system to our sleep, kind of the first part and the second part. So that is definitely an area that people are exploring.
Yes.
And I think, there are, to your point, there are many different ways of kind of looking at the quality of any of the sleep that we're getting. And that's where some of those wearables can be helpful to see what are the results of the actual sleep that we're getting. If it is fragmented, because I will have some clients that will have more wake ups than other clients, but we might be able to see that there's appears to be a decent amount of recovery happening. I will call out for people that one thing, if you are leaning in, because I have some clients that are wearing like 5 different wearables and they've got it on their head and they got it all thing, and which, listen, I get, I'm a lover of the data too, but just a quick call out is that as of right now, any of the sleep trackers that are on the hands or the wrist, the sleep stage classifications are still some of the weaker data that's on the that's available on those pieces of tech. So if you can lean into a bit more of, say, HRV can be quite eye-opening, because of course that's known as a metric of recovery. So certainly if it's a metric of recovery, when we're looking at nocturnal HRV, then that can give us a good idea of what our recovery looked like throughout the course of the night. You can also look at the arc of your HRV, see if there might be anything at play that's either having you be more relaxed at certain points of the night versus more stressed at certain points of the night. So a lot of information to be gleaned there, as well as respiratory, blood oxygen, body temperature, a number of things that you can get some insights around how the quality was.
And that HRV is tied to your heart rate, you guys. So if you have a lower heart rate, it's going to generally, and I've seen it almost invariably with my URA data, every time my heart rate gets to a certain level, the HRV jumps to like a really high level, and
yes,
it's cool to see that, the inverted relationship between HRV and heart rate.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. So I will get a lot of clients coming just for on that topic alone is one of their biggest things that they're looking to move the needle on is HRV. And they're looking to understand, how can I improve this over time by virtue of certainly improving sleep, and then some of the things that we know to improve sleep as a whole and improve the ability to recover. And that's why I think it's a particularly fascinating metric for sleep, because not only because it certainly looks at our overall health and well-being. One of the things, as far as cardiovascular health, to your point around its connection with heart rate, very much they're hugely connected. And then with that, you can also even get a sense of stress level, like your mental stress load. I mean, I've seen the most fascinating things. Every single client that we work with at least is wearing the Oura Ring, and sometimes other things, but they are required to wear the Oura Ring. So I'll see things when I had a client that they lived alone in New York, and they just had this little dog, and it was like their person, or their not person, but their other kind of connection, and the dog dies, and we see just this dramatic drop in HRV. And I'm just sharing this anecdotal story to make it visual, but in those moments, you can really get connected to some stressor comes along. I've had high performers that, they've lost a big contract or what have you, and then we see this dramatic drop in their HRV. And you can usually use a percentage indicator. So if you see that your HRV is dropping around 20%, then that is a sign often to just, kind of take it a bit easier. If you start seeing it over 40% or more, some of this is coming as well from Dr. Jay Wiles, which I know you're connected with, fantastic. And so having some of those kind of parameters by which we can start to ensure that we are taking note if there's something stressing our body and then not allowing us to properly recover throughout the course of the night, we want to kind of play a little bit of detective. I had a client that called it forensic sleepology to get at the source of what might be there. And it might be so Interesting. I mean, it's just so silly. Sometimes it's like, you know, I had a client that was having late night ice cream and it kept tagging their HRV. So sometimes it's just silly things that then we can make that adjustment and then we see it go right back up again. But it's the getting at the source of the why.
Did you go keto and thought you had to give up wine? Well, let me introduce you to Dry Farm Wines. It is the world's first sugar-free alcohol that is lower than your typical wines, organic, made at local farms that do it the right way. Most of the wines that you buy are from 3 really big companies, loaded with additives and preservatives, so many dozens of those kinds of things. You don't want all that junk in your wine. So go to dryfarmwines.com/Jimmy and they will ship you these wines. And just because you listen to this podcast, Dry Farm Wines is going to give you a bottle in your first order for just 1 cent. Go to dryfarmwines.com/Jimmy and you will get your bottle of wine for just 1 singular penny. Go check them out. Dry Farm Wines, you guys. It's wine o'clock somewhere. Let's go get some wine. You brought up something really interesting in there. I definitely want to talk about the mistakes I made in the past and then
please.
The things I've changed. But the whole relationship between stress levels and sleep is so interconnected. When people say, well, what's the detriment in your health? And I kind of go, bad sleep brought on by high stress. And look, stress in and of itself is not bad. There are things like hormesis. You want some stress in your life. When I get in that ice bath every day at 5:00 p.m., I'm putting stress on my body, but with a bigger purpose of overall relaxing the body and shifting from sympathetic to parasympathetic. So a good thing, which also increases HRV, by the way, lowers heart rate, by the way, all the things we were just talking about. But not enough credence is talked about with people not managing their stress well, and that's impacting their sleep. I would argue probably that's the biggest contributor to bad sleep. Would you concur?
Yeah, it's a huge factor. So that regulation of the nervous system, and I think some of us might not realize how pervasive it can be just from even the source of how we're breathing, you know, second to second to second. Are we mouth breathing versus nasal breathing? Exactly. Are we slouched over and affecting the diaphragm and the stomach? You know, there's so many things that we can make these tweaks and behavioral shifts starting really when we first wake up, and then to like what you do with the preconditioning of your ability to notice when you're going into that fear state, like with an ice bath. I mean, it's a perfect way to immediately bring a sense of kind of all over full body fear, and to be able to face that head on and train the body to breathe differently, to relate differently. Those things are so great to precondition ourselves, because so much of what I'll often see for people with their sleep is that this pervasive experience of I just can't turn off my mind. My brain keeps going. I just want to turn it off. They want to switch. And so much of that comes from just an inability to hit the brake on that sympathetic state and be able to kind of tap into a parasympathetic state. And so training for that throughout the course of the day. Now, I'll have a lot of clients using like New Calm, Brain Tap, certainly ice baths, breath work. You know, great resources, Oxygen Advantage, Breathe by James Nestor, different things to really get up under those topics can be huge.
I love 4-7-8 breathing. I do.
Yes, so simple.
I do 3 or 4 sessions of those, Molly. And as for those of you that don't know, you breathe in for 4 seconds, you hold it for 7 seconds, and then you breathe out for 8 seconds. So let's do that together real quick to kind of chill down.
Yes, please.
All right, so here we go. And we all feel better.
Right? It's just like a full body reset. Thank you for doing that. I'm going to start doing that on the podcast. You're pro level.
It is amazing how something so simple, and this is the key, guys. This is why I wanted Mollie on here today, because I know Mollie does these things. You guys know I'm crazy into all these little things to optimize sleep. It's not for any other purpose than we want to be as optimal as we can. If we're all about being healthy in our diet and in our movement and in other parts of what we do, why don't we give enough credence to sleep in the same way? And I haven't always been this way, Molly. I want to talk about some of the
Yes,
stupid
same.
stuff I did.
Great.
One of the ones, I'm not proud of it, but one of the things that I did over a decade ago now was I would use Tylenol cold. So the severe cold and sinus, whatever it's called, and it was a blue liquid. I remember I used to be able to buy it on the shelf. Then at some point they put it behind the pharmacy. I guess it was so addictive or whatever. And so there was some sleep aid in there, and I would pop it in my mouth, a big cup of it every single night, like a shot glass. And about an hour later, I would be out like a light.
Yes.
And it would help me go to sleep. And I was having trouble going to sleep. Did you ever do anything like that?
Yes, yes, and yes, 100%. And unfortunately, for years, that was part during that period when I was relating to, like, I just got to survive this problem or this kind of fixed innate thing where I just don't sleep great. That during that period of my life, I would lean into so many of those, and I'd have every single time there would be like a reason in my brain and say, oh, well, I gotta have a big day tomorrow. I gotta get up for this, that, and I would take those things, and there would be that often that immediate response. Over time, I even had less of that response where it was becoming less effective. Unfortunately, that's often the experience that so many people have. And that's not even getting into what was the quality of the sleep that I was getting. So that's where that kind of vicious cycle can often happen, because then our concern with having some of those antihistamines, the kind of Benadryl effect and what have you, is that when we have those night after night, then it seems to impact some of the sleep staging that we're going through, and that over time there seems to be link-ups with potential for dementia, Alzheimer's, and other neurodegenerative issues. So while something happens or you have a reaction or you are truly sick, maybe that can be a time from an acute standpoint to lean into some of those things. But for a long, for an actual protocol for our life, we absolutely want to see what is broken that's having us have to do that.
It got so bad at one point, Molly, that I went to put this in my carry-on bag on an airplane.
I've done that too. Yes.
I had my bottle, and I thought, okay,
it goes everywhere.
On a liquid, it'll come through, it'll get through. And they took it, and I was like bawling my eyes out because I'm like, no, I can't sleep without that. And it just became, that's when I realized that moment when they took my cold medicine away, I was like, I'm addicted.
Thank you for saying that, actually, because that's part of the beginning of the story for me when I went, because I was traveling internationally, and the problem was I hadn't brought it thinking that I could buy it there. And that was in my kind of naivete of that you can't actually, I wasn't able to get that in the EU because it's not something that you can just kind of get over the counter there.
Right.
And so then I went subsequent nights, multiple nights, jet lagged, and then not having that thing that crushed. It was such a mental addiction too, because I had it that I needed that. I couldn't trust my own body to sleep was the kind of background noise. And so then layer that on for days and days, then you're getting more anxious about it. You're in an unknown place. That was sort of a flare up for me. So 100%. And I appreciate your vulnerability in sharing that, because it's a very real thing that many people are leaning into right now.
Yes. And after I got past that and I was like, okay, I need something else. I thought I did something better. And here's another mistake I made. And guys, maybe you've done this because you've heard it helps with sleep. Melatonin. It's not a freebie. Like, I got some of the liquid melatonin. I remember it because it tasted like black cherry. It had the little thing and you could squirt it in your mouth. And I started off with just a few drops and it would knock me out. And I would do great. But then it was like the law of diminishing returns. After a while, I'd have to have 2 or 3 of those.
Yes.
And after a while, fill the whole syringe up and stick it in my mouth. And I was ending up getting like 80 milligrams of liquid melatonin. And at one point, it just stopped all the endogenous production of my own melatonin, so that I was highly dependent on this stuff. I remember it was Nora Gedgaudas, God bless her. Do you know Nora? Have you seen her work?
I don't, actually. I should get,
Yeah, Primal Body, Primal Mind was her big book that she did. Anyway, she was in the paleo, and she's kind of a low carb too. But I told her about what I was doing melatonin. She's like, Jimmy, get off of that. And she's the one that helped me identify that I was overdosing on the melatonin. And now look, everybody's, oh, it helps you sleep, high dose melatonin. And it's like, yes, but no. It was
Yes.
the cough syrup issue all over again.
Yeah. So the topic of melatonin is really there's kind of a divide in the way people are thinking about it. There's two real camps. So one is the camp of, like you're saying, high dose melatonin, and there's certain studies that people will point to, and this is a big like layer. You can almost have like a whole discussion about just melatonin. But you know, some of the studies that people will point to, some effectiveness around things like cancer and some really egregious issues that people are dealing with. So there is that group. And then the camp that I find myself often being in, and since I really err on the side of so much of this behavioral change, because I know that we can do a number of things to help support our own production of melatonin. And we really want to ideally start there and see how we can get up under this topic, because the thing that I think is really important for all of us to remember is that melatonin is a hormone. And I think many of us forget that, because especially in the United States, it is available everywhere, and it's often in kids' formulations for cold and flu and what have you. And it makes it just seem like that's, oh, it's just a natural thing to help us sleep. What's the big deal? But do know that when you go to other countries that often need prescription to get melatonin, so please almost just think of that and have some reverence for the fact that anytime you are taking really an exogenous hormone, you want to have some reverence for that topic. And so from that place, the fact that melatonin is known as the hormone of darkness, it's known as the vampire hormone. And so with that, I know these names, but with that, it's so interesting, because if you are kind of creating, and I think we alluded to circadian rhythm entrainment, so really starting to have this overarching umbrella of circadian rhythm entrainment can help us produce that melatonin. There's a fantastic, really interesting study out of NASA where they found that because it's very important for astronauts, since the sun is rising and setting sometimes every 90 minutes when you're in shuttling through, fast speeds, then you want to really ensure that your astronauts are staying on a strong circadian rhythm. So they get really adamant about what that structure looks like and what the lighting looks like to help support that. So with that, they would look at two different groups they have the same lighting virtually, 24 hours a day, and what happens to melatonin production and cortisol and other things. And then in the dynamic lighting group, you'll see that when the dynamic element is there, it's bright light throughout the course of the day, but then it's very dim and then total darkness at night. That is when we see this amazing uptick in melatonin production naturally, without needing to go and get the dropper and the thing and high doses. And granted, I know that there are individual cases. Certainly, there's sleep disorders, so do address those things, of course. But for the average person, begin there. Really look at those things, because you have so much power within you to shift this hormone in and of itself.
It's so great that you brought all of that up, because literally the next thing I did after Nora called me out was I started circadian rhythm entrainment by getting my eyes exposed to sun early in the day, before 10 a.m. You guys, you want to make sure you get that and don't look at the sun. Yeah, you can have it shining on you without looking at it, because people are like, look at it, I'll go blind. Well, don't be an idiot. But get it that time of day, and then maybe around noon to 2, try to get it again, then get it like in the afternoon, and then right as the sun is setting, you're telling your brain when you do that, hey, dummy, that was morning, this is the middle of the day, this is the afternoon, and this is night. And like you said, shoom. And when that sun goes down, Molly, now, and here in South Carolina right now, this time of year, it goes down around 5:30 at night.
Yeah.
I am sleepy at like 6 o'clock. And I'm like, and it's why I go to bed so early now, because that melatonin endogenous production, which is so ironic. 10 years ago, I was taking it. Now I'm making so much of it that I'm just like falling asleep. And sometimes I will go to bed at say 6:30. And then I'm up at say 12:30. I'll be up for a few hours and I get that couple more hours sleep, and I've had my nights of sleep. And so it's a thing, guys. It's a real thing.
Absolutely. And I think, especially, I mentioned that I'm particularly passionate too about my type A anxiety folks that are struggling with the issues of the inability to fall asleep, or they know themselves to maybe fall asleep, but then they wake up and then they're up and then they're anxious because they're up, or they're upset about it, or what have you. And so one of the amazing things that happen when we lean into circadian rhythm entrainment, and really it's just a fancy series of words to really have us align with these rhythms of nature. And I don't know about you, but in the past, before going through and learning what I learned, that might have seemed like, oh, come on, that can't be as powerful as the supplements or the drugs or the whatever. It is so powerful, and it's so innate and hardwired in our biology.
Yes.
To just be aligned with those things. So that would keep us on track for so many thousands of years. So to bring that back in, it can actually, I think, can be such an incredible even productivity hack, because you start to almost relate to your days where you got this period of sunlight and you're going, and this is when you move and you get your high body temperature. You're eating during this time, because of course eating can raise your body temperature and your heart rate and what have you. But then once the sun sets, then you're starting to shift over to kind of night mode, and then lowering your body temperature, lowering your ambient temperature in your environment. So in the long term, absolutely houses will be more fitted to kind of the circadian nature. So you won't even think about this. If you are in a smart home, maybe you might be wary of that for EMS or what have you. But if down the road, certainly thermostats will have the capability to kind of just set that tone for us so that it's warmer during the day, much, much cooler at night. And then you're eating less is really our goal in the evenings, because we know that can have kind of, if any of the people are wearing different trackers, so tracking your blood sugar and CGMs, then you'll often discover that there's much more difficulty in handling the very same type of food you might have earlier on in the day. If you have that in the evening, more kind of a spike tendency to happen later on, and then uptick in your body temperature and more difficulty falling asleep, because that acts as that circadian cue.
I love everything you just said, because if you look at it from an ancestral standpoint,
yes,
they were in a cave, and in the cave, what is it? It's pitch black. It's like dark, unless they turned on some candles or whatever. And so pitch black. So at night, have your lights down low. If you're going to look at a screen, at least put something that will block the blue light. In the sleep environment, make it cooler. And just so many things. And then, like, to your point about the eating, I stop eating at least 4 hours before I go to sleep.
Great.
Eating and drinking. I might sip things if I get parched or whatever. I'll take like a little sip of water, something like that. Sorry, I really needed water.
Yes, perfect too.
And then, like, to really kind of help the body temperature, core body temperature drop about 2 to 3 hours before bedtime, I do the ice bath and get in there for 5 minutes at like 32, 33 degrees. It's wonderful. I love it. Like, I can feel my body temp now is a little elevated. Well, that's the middle of the day. But in 5 hours from now, I want to be going to sleep. It needs to go down, and that induces getting to sleep, staying to sleep, and getting good restful sleep. So all of the things we're doing and what we're talking about here today, Mollie, is just mimicking what ancestral man and woman would have done thousands of years ago.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that that's a fascinating place to begin too, as kind of like our blueprint for how we're navigating this. Because sometimes it can feel like, oh, come on, do we really need to learn so much? Do we need to get all these different gadgets just to sleep? Like, it's so basic. And yet, if we do look back and bring that blueprint of kind of that ancestral behaviors, if we think about how it was likely that many of us were aligned, we would be sleeping pretty much on the ground, so much very cool. There's even an argument that that might be part of the reason why things like chili pad, 8 mattress, any of the cooling elements can really be beneficial, because that would have been one of the coolest spots that we would be on throughout the course of the night, and that would keep us cool. So then helping to support that quality rich sleep. Then when the sun is coming up, then of course there's a presence of light, and then there's a change in the temperature in the space. So now suddenly you're getting twofold. So anytime you can combine a change in light and temperature, you want to have those be doing the same thing that you want to have. So first, if I have shift workers, this is an area where they have to get really clear about this, because they have to kind of faux invent a change for themselves around how to manage this and know and really stick to that schedule 7 days a week. And all of us are really meant to do this. But from that place, when that sun would rise and the temperature goes up, that was such a fantastic cue that now we're awake and now we're taking on the day. We're turning off any leftover kind of faucet of melatonin that might be present. And then we're going into activity, movement, getting food, all of those things. But then when the sun would set, it was very much sort of party over, because now the temperature is immediately going down. There's total, virtually darkness. Fire was the first like biohack that would kind of extend it a little bit, because you got to extend your day a tiny bit. But the average person, unless you're very wealthy or what have you, you're not going to be going into 2 in the morning watching Netflix back in hunter-gatherer days. It just didn't happen. So it's fascinating to bring that in.
Which is why I'm a party pooper. People are like, oh, go out and meet people and at 10 o'clock at night. I'm like, no, I've been asleep a few hours by that point. It's like, people kind of mock it. Oh, you're getting older. That's what you do. But no, I'm getting more conscientious of the importance of my sleep. And that's why I do that. I would love to go out and have fun at that time of night, but my body is very well trained to sleep during that time.
Absolutely. And I love that you abide by that, because often people will come in and will work with sleep as a skill, and they'll be all excited about the biohacks, and we certainly have some of those things. But often the most powerful things are the least sexy, which is just consistency, like the ability to set your clear wake up time. So if anyone listening, if they're, want to get some clear practical takeaways, if you, really do nothing else, one, set your consistent wake up time and stick to that 7 days a week and see what can happen around there. And of course, you can have a little bit of variance around like 30 minutes plus or minus, or what have you. But you're largely looking to have that be your baseline average, and then pairing that with that light that you were speaking so eloquently to, so powerful. So having that consistency, that can often be one of the game changers for people, because certainly there might be some of those times when you can't avoid it, you got to go out. And you want to go out, there's a wedding, there's something important to you. So you do go out, you deviate from your normal bedtime. And then the important thing is to lead into, as Matt Walker calls it, the do nothing effect. So after you do that, then you do nothing. So you still wake up at around your same wake up time. You don't layer in more and more coffee or supplements, or you don't do all these extra kind of things, and then you don't then go to bed super early for you, because that can further throw off your rhythms. So instead you're looking to maintain that consistency, because with velocity that can get you back on track, versus now having to experience sort of a self-created jet lag for many days subsequently thereafter.
The newest things that I recently added is this upgraded magnesium from a company called Upgraded Formulas. Go to their website, upgradedformulas.com, and you can learn all about this nano technology that they use for this particular mineral of magnesium. Again, it's called Upgraded Magnesium. Upgradedformulas.com is the website. Go check them out. So Chef Mark had a really interesting question. I think it's related. Is he a follower of yours?
Yes, he's fantastic. Yeah.
So Mark may be describing what I was talking about with my segmented sleep earlier. But he said, will you discuss the medieval practice of the 2 sleeps, which is much in the news lately?
Yes, Mark, completely agree. And I know we kind of were speaking to that, Jimmy, a little bit earlier too, around really it's kind of in alignment with what you were speaking to, that 2-part system, the biphasic sleep patterns. And so a couple things about that. So one thing to be mindful, so what that points to is this concept that there seems to be evidence that for entire spans of time, it looks like there was these 2-part systems to people's sleep, and where it looked like it was really a thing where people would fall asleep, stay asleep for the first part of the night, and then be up and awake, and they might engage in, they might speak to each other, they might talk, they might do art, they might have sex, they might all these things, and then go back to sleep for that second part. Now, the important thing to call out with that one is, I think it's in alignment too with Jimmy, how you're managing this, is just giving yourself sufficient time that you're allowing to get the total sleep. So the thinking is that they were going to bed so close to when sun would be setting, then they have so much time until then the sun is rising again. And so they're playing with a wider window than the average person is. So just making sure that you're managing that so that you're getting sufficient total sleep numbers. And then also playing with some of these things with the circadian rhythm entrainment, because you might find that these things will adjust as you kind of clean up and get really consistent.
And I can tell you, I've done that so much that I kind of have the feeling like I'll get up to go to the bathroom and I kind of go, whoa, I'm still very heavy. I'm going back to the bed. But if I wake up and go to the bathroom and I'm just kind of like, wow, I really feel awake, then I will get on up. I'll be up for 3-4 hours. I've always got things to do with the podcast and writing books and stuff. And then at some point I will start to feel, as Dan Pardee talked about, that sleep pressure start to come on again.
Yes.
And I will go hit it and go back to sleep and get another good 2 solid hours in the bed. And what's funny, when I go back to bed, Molly, one of the first things I start, deep sleep. I mean, it just hits right away. The aura, it's almost consistently like you go lay down. And I've even taken naps during the daytime where it's like an hour of a nap, but 70% of that 1 hour was deep sleep. I have trained my body that when I'm down for that short amount of time, it's super efficient. And I think it's because I honor those signals. I feel the heaviness, go lay down. Like right before this interview, when I was in my massage chair, chilling out, not asleep, because I was afraid, how bad would it be going to do a sleep interview and I fell asleep before the interview. But yeah, honoring those signals that your body gives you.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's so important. And I think the other thing to be mindful of too is that sometimes we can learn of certain things and then really run with it. So what I mean by that is, so just kind of keeping yourself in check, because for one that I've seen is the chronotype. So people might say, oh, listen, I'm a night owl, it's fine, don't even worry about it. And then they keep, they have that narrative. And there are certainly differences in different people. But when we do lean into circadian rhythm entrainment, often what the average person finds in certain really powerful studies, one at the University of Colorado found that when they took even people that really call themselves night owls, they took them camping basically for an extended period of time. Yes, right. The camping study is really cool. They started moving back their time, and then they really started pretty quickly aligning with the rhythms of nature. So be careful not to then give yourself a label, because I did this. So I would make myself, I'd say I'm extreme night owl, so I got to go to bed super late, I got to work late, I got to do all this stuff. And I had that narrative. So be careful about that, because there are things that we can adjust. There might be some behavioral things. The other thing about the biphasic is that I have seen clients that would say, listen, it's fine. I make my own schedule, so I'm just going to sleep in later. So I gave myself this huge window of bedtime, wake time. But what they would be doing in that in-between time, they would be going onto their phone. They would be, I had some that were watching sports stuff, like, just getting their mind all activated. And then it was extending the period of time by which they were kind of just more awake. The brain state was a bit higher. Even when you like kind of walk around, your heart rate can go up a bit. So just being mindful that there are things. So once they started kind of bringing those things back, getting more clarity on the bedtime and wake time that they had, and kind of restricting that a bit, then they did have less and less of those wake ups. So do know they can play around with this.
You know what I do when I get up in the middle of the night? First thing I do is pop in the hot tub and chill out. So I continue, because sometimes things that will wake me up, I'll have like a little backache or something, just something pain wise. I injured my toes recently, and so I'll feel the throb, and that wakes me up. So if I get up, I'll do things to relax and kind of chill, so that when the body's ready to go lay back down again, I haven't excited it. Yes, I've watched a few sports things and did a little
Yes.
but it doesn't excite my brain, because I'm doing other things simultaneously to calm the body, even if I'm stimulating my eyes and watching and looking at highlights of scores and that kind of thing.
Yes. Oh, another thing I found for clients, if they are dealing with pain issues or what have you, interesting things that they can bring in is red light therapy. So, right, like the flex beam is great to kind of wrap around specific areas, or if you want a panel, you can be mindful too. There have been studies that have come out of like super bright lights, even if it is red, that seem to still be a bit excitatory, but as long as you're managing the level of that, then bringing in that red light therapy can be another approach to kind of help with some of that pain. Some people do CBD, different kind of anti-inflammatories, because I think that's a big one, the pain concept.
So my nighttime regimen, in addition to all the things I mentioned earlier about not eating, drinking for 4 hours, ice bath, I also take this really high quality magnesium from
Sure.
the upgraded formulas is the one I met him
Yes,
at
Martin. Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah,
my
I got that
podcast.
too.
He was on my podcast recently, and he's like, "Dude, take this and you'll sleep well." I'm like, "I already sleep pretty good." He's like, "It's going to be even better," and I'm like, "Okay, heard that before." And so I humor people, and
Yeah.
to Barton Scott's credit, he's made
Yeah.
an incredible product, the little nanotechnology stuff that he uses. So I take 2 of those about 2 hours before bedtime, and then I also take some CBD. We were talking in DM just last night. I'm like, all right, I had my magnesium, I had my CBD, and I just got out of the ice bath. And she's like, "Oh yeah, we are so on the same page."
That is amazing. And I also want to acknowledge you too, because I like that with your ice bath, I like that you have a little bit of a buffer space in there, because I have had some clients that will do it right before bed, and because it can get you excited too. So you do a great job then of having enough of that time, because that's one of the things that there's still a lot of kind of controversy or discussion on when do you apply these heat and cold therapies.
Right.
So some people will have heat therapy in the evening before bed, because the thinking is once you get out of the hot sauna, bathtub, what have you, then on the other side of that, the process of lowering your body temperature actually gets it to a bit of a cooler state than it might have been before. Now, but there's also been benefits to other people doing cold shower rinses or cold baths. So one of the kind of the agreed upon, or the thinking as of right now, is that if you're going to have either one of these, especially like a very high hot sauna, you want to have sufficient time to kind of cool down from that, because that can get your body, your heart temperature up, all of a lot of changes. So giving yourself enough time. But then also, if you're going to have the cold therapy, also having enough time, because there might be a bit of those stress response systems at play. So I like that you do that.
Especially with the extreme temperature. I'm doing 32, 33 degrees when I do it. I'm in there for 5 minutes, to the point that I don't feel my hands for like 3 minutes after I get out of there, because it's so cold. But I think somebody that rinses off in a shower for a couple minutes right before bedtime, I think that's beautiful, because in the shower, you're talking, 50, 60 seconds at the coldest. So I don't think it's going to make them so cold, and they're not in there long enough.
You're not shivering response. You're not going into that state.
And that's why in my 32, 33 degree and for 5 minutes, the reason I give it a couple of hours is because my shiver response could sometimes start around 15 to 20 minutes after getting out, and last till about an hour after I get out. I'm still kind of doing the little shiver thing. And so it's not conducive to sleep if you're shivering. And so
yes. And that's another reason why it's so great, because now you have this body of data. So, probably years of Oura Ring data and what have you. So you can see and play with some of these things. So I have had some clients that will play around, and they might discover for them, for their life, they do the cold therapy a bit earlier on in the day. They like the hit of the kind of awake, the dopamine hit, all of these things. So they'll use that as kind of a productivity hack. And then they'll have more of like a warm response in the evening to kind of calm down, play with it, and then test and see, and do it for around 14 to 30 days just to get some data for yourself.
So Molly, I tried 2:00 in the afternoon one day with the ice bath.
Yes.
What a horrible idea for Jimmy Moore, because I got in there at 2, and by 4:00 I was so tired I had to go to bed, and I ended up sleeping from 4 until midnight, which was a long period of time that I was in the bed. But it knocked me out. There's some kind of hormone that gets turned on in me being in that cold. I don't know if my core body temperature just drops to a level that it's like, okay, it's bedtime. So I know people like to do the ice baths in the morning or earlier in the day. I'm afraid it
has not worked.
Knocks me out in the middle of the day. So.
Wow. Okay. So, and that's another reason why it's so important, this bio-individuality, to test, see what works, look at that objective data, look at the quality of your sleep, look at all these things, because, and continue to kind of be a detective in your life, in your sleep, and see what are some of the things that you can do to support yourself to make a difference and that lasts over the long term. And then you just feel really great with it. And certainly that's part of the goal with the ice baths, is some of these really powerful studies more recently showing lasting dopamine effects for hours thereafter. I mean, it's just an incredible process in finding where to fit it in your day.
Now, you mentioned it earlier, and I would be remiss if we didn't talk about it, even though it's kind of taboo to talk about, but sex is a great aspect of good sleep. And like, look, guys, if you've got a mate, utilize that relationship for this purpose. I mean, hey, honey, I need to sleep good tonight. Let's go. But like, it's a thing,
Yes.
right?
Okay, so I have lots of thoughts about that one. So one, I have a lot of clients wearing the Leaf, LIEF, which is a continuous HRV tracker throughout the daytime. So versus nighttime HRV, it's daytime HRV. And so I have self-experimented with wearing the Leaf and then have your time with your partner. And with sex, it's a fascinating thing because then you can often see, and of course it depends on your relationship with the person and a lot of other emotions that might come up. But for the average person, and there's longer conversations. We actually had a podcast on this with some of the founders over at Leaf, and speaking to this very topic of anytime you can have sort of that cortisol flushing that really is the effect of an orgasm, to go through that process, then there's often improvement in HRV. And so you can measure that, you can test it. So that can be one thing really fascinating. The other thing that's I think is interesting, CES, one of the largest, consumer tech events, a few years back, right before the lockdown, they had the sex tech section, and then they had the sleep tech section. And sex tech, that was the first year, 2020, that they were allowed to kind of legally be there, because in the past they weren't. And I actually thought it was a fantastic grouping, and I kind of pinballed back and forth between the sleep and the sex tech, because there were so many complementary things that were happening in the sex tech arena of, people talk about these nighttime routines or things that they can do to kind of calm themselves. So it's fantastic. And if you're single, kind of the self-pleasure, and that was what some of these sex tech things were leaning into. And what they also were finding was a circadian nature to the orgasm strength, which I thought was fascinating. So they're looking at some of the strength of your orgasm based on if you do it, have that in the morning, have that at night. So it's just a really cool area. And I think you're so right to touch on that.
Well, and I hate that it's so taboo to talk about these kind of topics. It's like, it's a part of human nature as much as breathing, eating, everything that we do. So it's not a dirty word, people. Arlene said you should try, Jimmy, cold plunging in the daytime as an experiment so you can let us know. I'm actively going to do that. So
yay! I would love to hear about that.
I don't want to do it during my work week because I have so much during the week, but on the weekend is a perfect time to do it. So that is on the agenda, Arlene. Thank you for that suggestion, because, that one time I did it at 2 in the afternoon, and I was at 4 o'clock. I'm just like, I know my bud, Mike Muscle, does like a minute or two in the morning, minute or two at night, and so he does both with the ice pads.
Yeah, please let us know what comes out of that experiment. I'd love to hear that.
Yes. So, Mollie, we're all out of time. Again, you guys, Mollie McGlocklin. Go check her out, Mollie McGlocklin, over on Instagram, MOLLIEMCGLOCKLIN. And she's got a whole lot of links here on her link tree. Definitely go listen to her sleep optimization podcast. But yeah, she's got all this stuff on her link tree. Go check out all of the great work that she's doing. She's one of the top people that, when I was like trying to find things about sleep, you were one of the top results that came up for me, besides all the usual suspects.
Sure, of course.
But you seem to be the most personable ones of all the ones, and you're a podcaster. Some of these other sleep people, they don't do podcasts. So thank you for being a sleep podcaster. Are you just strictly interview based, or do you do kind of a hybrid where you do some teaching as well?
Yeah, really good question. So right now it's all been interview based. We are going to start bringing in more kind of solo episodes. We haven't done that yet, but looking forward to bringing some of those in. And then we also do our weekly newsletter every Monday. So we're on 180 something editions of that, where we also try to bring in some of the questions that we might get, or sleep experiments that people are doing, or sleep kind of graphs. So we're looking at different sleep stats and kind of breaking those down. So we'd like to try to address some of those in the newsletter too. And we'll soon be bringing those into more of the podcast too.
Well, Mollie, thank you so much for being here today.
Well, Jimmy, I just want to thank you for the work that you've been doing, your passion, and just how open and just such a wonderful forum that you create to have these conversations. It really makes a huge difference, and to bring everyone into the fold and to be vulnerable and open to share like some of the things that you and myself too that we went through that didn't work, because sometimes that's just such a huge teaching piece in of itself. So thank you for doing that and for having me be here.
Thank you. And you're right. Like so many people, they think all of us influencers, we have everything figured out and we've always been perfect. No, people, no.
Yes. Oh, this is a lifelong thing. I mean, I told you, I just discovered this histamine thing, and this has been a whole new piece to the puzzle. So now I'm going to have histamine experts coming on the podcast, so it doesn't end. It's an exciting area to continue to improve and learn. So I think it really can be fun.
And the moment you think you've figured everything out, you've just scratched the surface.
Yeah, exactly.